Thank you for tuning in to TSC Talks weekly update. I'm Jill Woodworth and I'm the host of this podcast, TSC Talks. We are a kind of a unique podcast in that we cover a broad range of topics. Started out in the special needs area and it kind of merged over into cannabis and natural medicines and just kind of culture all mingled together. So that's what we're about. Again, I'm Jill, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about what is happening on the podcast. I'm freaking nervous. It's been crazy with going back to remote learning. My offspring started yesterday, and my son is 19. He has some issues related to TSC, and first day of remote learning, he had to join these classes, online classes, and needless to say, it was really challenging. And yes, today was even more challenging to the point where I slammed down the computer and I said that he was done for the day because I don't know how there's just, I guess, what I wanted to talk about with this whole thing and COVID, and I know everybody's going through these remote learning challenges. Amora, our other podcast pal here that works on the podcast, she had to take a few steps away to get her kids started, and everybody's had extreme challenges, and we're all being pushed and pulled in ways that we might not have before expected or been able to anticipate. So I think everybody is kind of caught off guard in a lot of ways. So when I get really upset about something and start to just beam down on that one issue, boy, can I get myself into a quandary. So I'm going to try to stop doing that and just say it's challenging for everybody. I don't know what it's like for the teachers trying to navigate this and, cover all the heaping liability issues that I'm sure are involved and just help all of us in this country, in this world, just deal with these circumstances and challenges that we are immersed in now. So yeah, I do a podcast, and currently on the podcast that's currently running is What is a Green Nurse, part of our What is a Green Nurse series. The most recent podcast was with Mark Worcester, who is a green nurse, male green nurse. So we wanted to get the perspective from not only a green nurse, which is a step away from traditional nursing. However, they are registered nurses typically, and there's a lot of green nurse organizations out there, the ACNA, and I'm not going to go through them because I'm going to murder them. But bridging the gap between traditional medicine and alternative medicine or natural medicine, and Lisa's met. Yes, I am on. Uh-oh. I hope I'm on the Facebook page. Yeah, so let me just double check. Anyways, yes, I'm here. I'm going to record this even if no one is listening. Anyway, so yeah, what is a green nurse? And a great conversation with Mark, and then Sherry joined in, and we just kind of did a little casual conversation about issues related to cannabis stigma and our own personal stigmas getting into it. And, I think a lot of what I want people to understand, or not understand, but to hear is these women, in a lot of cases, and men, sometimes have come to it with having life-changing, challenging circumstances, or like their things tank. Like, for instance, Sherry had this crazy C. diff gastrointestinal thing, or like really intense conditions that drag them to the point where they realize that there's this whole new world with cannabinoid medicine, and there's these other tools out there. And that's what I'm trying to highlight, that we focus on traditional medicine, which is what I was told recently is really only a quarter of all the healing practices out there that we have. And we've developed this way of just honing in on the small portion. So I don't know if this video is playing. Anyways, that's Green Nurses. Check them out. It's not just a few nurses. They're all over the country. I've had other green nurses on. I've had, let's see, Marissa Frattoni, Janice Champagne on autism, Jessie Gill. She was like one of the first ones I had on. Marijuana Mommy, Dee Dee Cully, two leaf screen nurses, Bonnie Drake out there in Michigan. Yes, and Nikki Lawley. I don't know if she goes by Green Nurse, but she was a guest, and I believe she was a nurse. And Mark and Sherry. So I may have missed somebody, and I really apologize. Danny McQueen, I believe, went through the nursing. So I've had a lot of guests that are green nurses, and I think each of them has a story. It's not just like they jumped into it and we're like, woohoo, we're gonna jump over here because we're gonna make lots of money and save the world. And it's a learning curve. So. And currently, or next up on the podcast is OP Innovates. They are a really interesting bunch of people that are bringing together a lot of deep activism and learned and lived experience with Keith Butler being involved in, back in smoking a joint in front of the White House in the early days of activism in the cannabis industry, and pairing with some deep scientific medical knowledge with Dr. Jim McCain. So those two come on the podcast to talk about their entrepreneurial industry, and also, so that's a great podcast that's going to be dropped in the next few days. And they talk a lot. What I loved is, Keith talked about just the difference with alcohol and how that's so socially acceptable. And, meanwhile, in pharmaceutical, everybody's on all these pharmaceuticals or whatnot. And he personally here smoked pot for most of his life, and didn't end up on a bunch of pharma. And, a lot of us don't have that experience, but he did, and his health is great. And I think we're waking up to the fact that cannabis is medicine, and it has been for a long time. So that's a cool podcast. And Dr. Jim lays it out there about how he was immersed in the traditional medicine mindset and really had to be, really dug into the science, and not just in the US, but in Israel, and where the new discoveries are being made about the endocannabinoid system. And once he caught on, he was like, oh, wow, this is a whole world here that we need to understand. So great podcast. And I got the chance to talk to, I don't want to call her a psychic. She's a spiritual guide. Wow. Let's see. Her business is Quantum Freedom, Catherine Caulfield, and we had a great chat about all over the place, but the Zoom dropped out in the middle of it, so we had to do a two-parter. So that's coming up. I had Lady Canna, Tiffany Watkins, on again. So that's in the bucket, and she's talking about her Vanguard magazine, which is a wonderful platform for women's voices. She's a female business owner, and she's been in the industry as an activist, worked in the industry, great, powerful voice for just the evolution of the women's movement and the cannabis industry in general. So Tiffany's coming up. I'm also working on something that those that still listen to me from TSC, the TSC community, with Daniel Price. And, I really love to dip back in and hear people's stories and what's going on. And I just feel like when you have a condition such as TSC that affects, the benign tumors in different organs of the body, which really don't end up being benign for all the trouble they cause in the organs, in our organ-based methodology is kind of a, Tower of Babel that I've waxed poetic about. I don't need to go into that, but Daniel approached me. Daniel Price has been on the podcast. He's a young man living with TSC. He happens to be gay. He happens to be adopted, and he was a great guest. And he popped up and said, Jill, why don't we do a podcast about what it's like having TSC during COVID? And at first I'm like, I really don't want to talk about that. I don't want to think about anything in that area right now. I'm just overwhelmed myself with, the remote learning and other issues that we all deal with. No matter what you're dealing with, we all have issues. So anyways, Daniel said that, and I was like, okay. He had the courage to come up and bring that in front of me, I'm gonna honor that, and we're gonna work on it together. So Daniel and I have been working together. He's spearheading this TSC and COVID conversation. We've invited like 8 people so far to be on September 26th and just talk about the additional challenges to getting care, what the future might look like, what we're worried about, what has been positive, and communicate. And I think that's what this podcast is all about. It's about communicating. I started it because I felt like there were little pieces in between that, as the years went on, became bigger pieces, and I felt disconnected and alone. And I will tell you, I remember, certain significant events that led me to want to talk about, the deeper challenges, the emotional challenges, the things that we don't like to talk about, because those little things that often that seem to be little things get brushed under the rug, and over time they build up and can wreak a lot of havoc in our lives. And I know that, I'm still recovering from doing that. And so I'm here to tell you about share my process for moving through this. And I was immersed in traditional medicine. That was my mindset. I really felt like I didn't have a choice. You're living in the moment, and, I had to keep my kids alive in a lot of cases. You're putting out brush fires every day. You don't have a lot of time to think outside the box, think there might be other ways to look at this. But as time passed, and, I feel like, again, I was kind of forced to look outside the box. It was depressing and heavy, and I needed to just lift my head a little bit and look around at all these alternative options, and just kind of slowly get into them. And again, it's affordability too. I didn't have the who can afford to pay out of pocket for these services that can help. So that's my motivation, and that's kind of where we are. We're bringing forth information, and we're sharing resources. We want to know what you have to ask about, what you want to hear on the podcast. Any questions, you can shoot them at me now if you're listening. I'm not sure this is even on, but I will play it later. So if you have a question, you can shoot it over. I have about 3 minutes. And and my partner, Lisa, let's see, is she going to join me? I don't know if she is. She said she'd stop by. Anyways, this is my first weekly update, and I'm going to do this every week. I want to connect with the community. I want to connect with whoever's listening, and I want to make it better and find out what you want to hear and explain what we're doing. And yeah, that is about it. I'm just going to pause here and see if anybody, I don't even know if this is live. Yeah, it hasn't been the best day, but best few moments. There's going to be better moments. We have other guests in the pipeline, thinking about who's coming up. Tiffany and Catherine Caulfield, and then the OP Innovates are going to be dropped soon. And the TSC and COVID combo. So that's about it. I think I'm going to wrap this up and get on about my day. And I hope good luck to all of you out there dealing with the remote learning, and especially those that have kids with special needs right now. There's just no real correct, there's not words, I guess. There's overwhelming challenges all over the place, and it's just not fair. They don't have the ability to advocate for themselves in many cases, and parents, caregivers, support systems are burdened with other aspects of this situation. So, not to put anybody on the defensive right now, but it's challenging. My heart goes out to people that have circumstances that I've learned about that are far more challenging. That's what it's about. It's trying to listen to what other people's challenges are, and turning off what you have in your head that you think is how they should operate or how you think they should. So anyways, that is about it. Over and out on TSC Talks.